Our story begins not in a bustling city precinct, but on a quiet, tree-lined street in the seemingly idyllic suburb of Meadow Creek. This is where Chief Thomas, a man more comfortable chasing down criminals than navigating neighborhood politics, calls home. He's the kind of guy who prefers a strong cup of coffee and a simple donut to fancy power lunches, and his dedication to his job is well known throughout the county. He's a good cop, respected by his officers and generally well-liked by the community he serves. But Meadow Creek, with its manicured lawns and matching mailboxes, has a dark secret: the Meadow Creek Homeowners Association, or HOA, and its iron-fisted president, Patricia, whom everyone, behind her back, of course, calls Karen. The HOA rules are legendary for their pettiness. Fines are levied for everything from having the wrong shade of white on your window trim to leaving your holiday decorations up a day past the deadline. Karen, a retired accountant with a penchant for power and an eagle eye for rule infractions, runs the HOA with an almost military precision. She sees herself as the guardian of Meadow Creek's pristine aesthetic, and woe betide anyone who dares to cross her. Chief Thomas, while generally a law-abiding citizen, isn't particularly attentive to HOA regulations. He's too busy dealing with real-world problems, burglaries, traffic accidents, the occasional domestic dispute, to worry about whether his lawn is precisely 2.5 inches tall. He figures as long as he's not causing any real trouble, he can fly under Karen's radar. He is, after all, the chief of police. Surely, she has bigger fish to fry than him. He is, unfortunately, very wrong. The HOA wasn't just strict, it was creatively, almost artistically, strict. They had committees dedicated to ensuring conformity. There was the Holiday Decoration Placement and Duration Committee, the Acceptable Shrubbery Species Committee, and, perhaps the most feared of all, the Trash Can Visibility and Retrieval Promptness Committee. Each committee member took their role incredibly seriously, armed with measuring tapes, color charts, and an unwavering belief in the sanctity of suburban uniformity. Karen, as president, oversaw all these committees, ensuring that their judgments were enforced with ruthless efficiency. She had a particular fondness for sending out violation notices, printed on bright pink paper to ensure they couldn't be missed. These notices, often detailing the most minuscule of infractions, were the bane of many residents' existence. Old Mrs. Henderson, bless her heart, had once received a notice for having a gnome in her garden that was half an inch taller than allowed. Young Timmy Johnson got fined for accidentally kicking his soccer ball into Mrs. Davison's perfectly symmetrical flower bed. The stories were endless, and they all led back to Karen and her unwavering dedication to the HOA rulebook. But the rules weren't just annoying, they were, to many, a source of genuine stress. People felt constantly scrutinized, afraid to make even the smallest mistake. The sense of community was slowly being eroded by the fear of fines and the ever-present threat of Karen's pink notices. Chief Thomas, however, remained largely oblivious to this undercurrent of suburban anxiety. He was too busy dealing with real emergencies to notice the subtle signs of HOA-induced stress in his neighbors. He waved to Karen when he saw her, offered a polite, "good morning," and went about his day, assuming that the HOA was just another one of those things you had to deal with as a homeowner. He couldn't have been more wrong. The collision course between the dedicated police chief and the HOA's zealous president was set, and it was only a matter of time before it exploded. The fateful pink notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, nestled amongst the junk mail and bills. Chief Thomas, bleary-eyed after a particularly long night dealing with a string of car break-ins, almost tossed it straight into the recycling bin. Luckily, the bright pink color caught his attention. He unfolded the paper, expecting to find an advertisement for a local dry cleaner or maybe a coupon for pizza. Instead, he was greeted with the stern, official-looking logo of the Meadow Creek HOA and a list of alleged violations. He scanned the document, his brow furrowing in confusion. The first violation was for excessive lawn ornamentation, apparently referring to the plastic flamingo he'd inherited from his Aunt Mildred and placed, somewhat ironically, near his mailbox. The second violation was even more absurd, unapproved receptacle placement, which, as far as he could tell, meant he'd left his trash can out on the curb for slightly longer than the allowed 12 hours after trash pickup. But the real kicker, the one that earned him the $79 fine, was for failure to maintain acceptable vegetative ground cover. In simpler terms, his grass was too long. Not drastically overgrown, mind you, but just a tad shaggier than the HOA's prescribed 2.5 inches. Chief Thomas chuckled. $79 for slightly long grass. It seemed ridiculous. He made a mental note to mow the lawn that weekend and figured he'd just pay the fine online later. He was, after all, a busy man. He had real crimes to solve, real problems to address. A slightly overgrown lawn and a plastic flamingo hardly seemed like a matter of urgent concern. He tossed the notice onto his kitchen counter, intending to deal with it later, and headed off to work, completely unaware that he had just stepped into a battle with Karen that would test his patience, his authority, and his understanding of suburban absurdity. The $79 fine was just the opening salvo. Days turned into weeks, and the pink notice remained on the kitchen counter, slowly fading under the morning sun. Chief Thomas, as predicted, got caught up in the whirlwind of his job. There was a string of robberies downtown, a missing teenager case that consumed his every waking moment, and the usual assortment of traffic accidents and petty crimes that kept the police force on their toes. The $79 fine, the plastic flamingo, and the slightly long grass faded into the background, becoming a distant memory amidst the chaos of his daily life. He kept meaning to pay it, of course. He even opened the HOA website a couple of times, only to be interrupted by a phone call or a pressing email. He figured he'd get to it eventually, maybe on a slow day when there wasn't a crisis to manage. But there were no slow days. The demands of his job were relentless, and the HOA fine simply slipped further and further down his to-do list. He wasn't deliberately ignoring it, he just had more important things to worry about. Saving lives, catching criminals, and keeping the community safe took precedence over meticulously manicured lawns and perfectly placed trash cans. Meanwhile, at HOA headquarters, which was, in reality, Karen's meticulously organized home office, the unpaid fine had not gone unnoticed. Karen had a system for tracking violations and fines, a complex spreadsheet that she updated religiously. Every unpaid fine was a personal affront, a challenge to her authority, and a stain on Meadow Creek's pristine reputation. As the days turned into weeks, Karen's resolve hardened. She wouldn't let this transgression go unpunished. Chief Thomas, whoever he was, would learn that no one, not even the chief of police, was above the rules of the Meadow Creek HOA. The pink notices were just the beginning. Karen had bigger plans in store. The towing company was on speed dial. The first follow-up notice was a simple reminder, printed on the same cheerful pink paper, but with a slightly more assertive tone. Dear resident, it began, this is a friendly reminder that your account is currently past due. Please remit payment of $79.00 at your earliest convenience to avoid further action. Chief Thomas barely glanced at it before tossing it into the same pile as the original notice. He really would pay it soon, he told himself. The second notice, arriving a week later, was less friendly. The font was slightly larger, the language more formal. Urgent notice, delinquent account. Failure to pay the outstanding balance of $79.00 within 48 hours will result in late fees and further enforcement actions, as outlined in the Meadow Creek HOA bylaws, Section 3, Subsection B, Paragraph 12. This one did give him a momentary pang of guilt, but then his phone rang with news of a bank robbery, and the notice was promptly forgotten once again. The third and final notice was practically a declaration of war. It was printed on bright red paper this time, and the words, "Final Warning," were emblazoned across the top in bold, uppercase letters. The tone was downright accusatory. Immediate action required. Your continued failure to pay the outstanding balance of $79.00 constitutes a blatant disregard for the rules and regulations of the Meadow Creek HOA. As a result, we are authorized to take further action, including but not limited to, placing a lien on your property and/or towing your vehicle at your expense. Consider this your final warning. This time, Karen had even included a handwritten note at the bottom: Mr. Thomas, we take our rules very seriously in Meadow Creek. I suggest you do the same. Chief Thomas, still oblivious to the impending doom, never even saw the red notice. It arrived while he was out of town, attending a law enforcement conference. It sat unopened on his doorstep, a silent testament to the escalating conflict between a busy police chief and a determined HOA president. The stage was set for the ultimate showdown, the towing of the chief's car. The day started like any other Saturday. Chief Thomas, back from his conference, was finally enjoying a rare morning off. He was looking forward to a leisurely breakfast, maybe catching up on some reading, and definitely mowing that ridiculously long grass. He even had the $79 check sitting on his desk, ready to be mailed. He was about to head outside when his phone rang. It was dispatch, calling him in to assist with a major traffic accident on the highway. Duty called. He sighed, grabbed his keys, and headed out the door. He noticed a tow truck slowly cruising down the street, but didn't think much of it. Tow trucks were a common sight in any town, and he certainly didn't expect it to be coming for him. He unlocked his car, a perfectly ordinary, slightly dusty sedan, and paused, a nagging feeling of unease creeping into his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was forgetting something. But the accident on the highway was weighing on his mind, and he dismissed the feeling as simple pre-work jitters. He got into his car, started the engine, and put it in reverse. That's when he saw it. The tow truck, now directly behind his car, its lights flashing ominously. A gruff-looking man in a greasy uniform was hooking up chains to his bumper. "Hey! What are you doing?" Chief Thomas yelled, rolling down his window. The tow truck driver, without making eye contact, simply pointed to a small, official-looking sign posted on a nearby lamppost: "Unauthorized vehicles will be towed at owner's expense. Meadow Creek HOA." Chief Thomas was stunned. His car. Towed? For what? He got out of his car, his police instincts kicking in. "Excuse me, sir, I need to see some identification and the paperwork authorizing this tow." The tow truck driver finally looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Lady said you knew why." "Just doing my job." And with that, he hopped back into his truck and started to winch Chief Thomas's car away. The chief's Saturday morning had just taken a very unexpected turn. And Karen was nowhere to be seen. The tow truck rumbled down the street, Chief Thomas's sedan in tow, leaving the chief standing on the curb, a mixture of disbelief and annoyance washing over him. The accident on the highway suddenly seemed a lot less pressing. He watched the tow truck disappear around the corner, then let out a long, frustrated sigh. He walked back into his house, grabbed his phone, and called dispatch. "This is Chief Thomas. I'm going to be delayed getting to the scene of that accident. I need to handle something first." He hung up, resisting the urge to explain that his car had just been towed over a $79 fine. He imagined the reaction he'd get from his officers, a mixture of amusement and disbelief. He could already hear the jokes. He decided to call the towing company first. After navigating a confusing automated system, he finally got through to a live person. "Ace Towing, how can I help you?" a bored voice droned. "Yes, my car was just towed from Meadow Creek. I need to know where it's being taken and what I need to do to get it back." The voice on the other end sighed dramatically. "Name and make of the vehicle." Chief Thomas provided the information. After a moment of silence, the voice returned. "Yep, we got it. It's being held at our impound lot on Industrial Drive. There's a release fee of $150, plus storage fees of $50 per day. You'll also need to provide proof of ownership and a valid driver's license." Chief Thomas's annoyance began to simmer into anger. $150 plus $50 per day for a $79 fine. It was highway robbery. He took a deep breath, reminding himself that he was a police officer and needed to remain calm. "Okay," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "And what was the reason for the tow?" "HOA impound." "You'll have to take that up with them," the voice replied curtly. "We just do the towing." Chief Thomas hung up, his jaw clenched. This was getting ridiculous. He knew he needed to handle this situation carefully, but he also knew that he wasn't going to let Karen and her HOA get away with this blatant overreach. He had a feeling this was going to be a long and frustrating day. Industrial Drive was exactly as Chief Thomas expected, a desolate stretch of road lined with auto repair shops, warehouses, and, of course, Ace Towing's impound lot. The lot was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, and a surly-looking guard sat in a small booth near the entrance. Chief Thomas parked his personal, and very unmarked, police vehicle across the street and walked towards the impound lot, trying to project an air of calm authority, despite the simmering frustration bubbling inside him. He approached the guard booth. "I'm here to pick up my car," he said, flashing his driver's license. "It was towed from Meadow Creek this morning." The guard, unimpressed, barely glanced at the license. "Name?" Chief Thomas provided his name. The guard squinted at a clipboard filled with handwritten notes. "Yep, Thomas. Sedan. $150 release fee, plus 1 day's storage, $50. That'll be $200. Chief Thomas raised an eyebrow. $200. For a $79 fine. That seems a bit excessive, don't you think? The guard shrugged. That's what the HOA authorized. We just follow orders. Cash or credit? I'd like to see some documentation authorizing this tow and these fees, Chief Thomas insisted, his voice hardening slightly. The guard sighed, clearly annoyed. "Look, buddy, I don't have time for this. Pay the fee or your car stays here. I got other cars to process." Chief Thomas took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. He knew he could pull rank, flash his badge, and probably get the fees waived, but that wasn't the point. This wasn't about him, it was about the principle of the matter. The HOA was abusing its power, and he wasn't going to let them get away with it. "All right," he said, reaching for his wallet. "I'll pay the fee. But I want a receipt, and I want a copy of the authorization form from the HOA." He paid the $200, collected the paperwork, and headed towards his car, his mind already racing with plans to confront Karen and put an end to this ridiculous situation once and for all. The battle was on. As Chief Thomas was about to leave the impound lot, he noticed the tow truck driver from earlier leaning against his truck, smoking a cigarette. He decided to approach him. "Excuse me," Chief Thomas said, holding up the copy of the authorization form. "This form is signed by Patricia Miller, the HOA president. Do you always tow cars based solely on her say-so?" The tow truck driver took a drag from his cigarette and shrugged. "Like I said, lady calls, we tow. Pays good money. Do you ever verify the validity of these tows? Check if the homeowners have been properly notified? Or if the fines are legitimate?" Chief Thomas pressed, his voice calm but firm. The tow truck driver flicked his cigarette butt onto the ground. "Look, Chief, I ain't a lawyer. I just drive the truck. HOA says tow, I tow. End of story." Chief Thomas paused, considering his options. He knew he wasn't going to get anywhere with this guy. He was just a cog in the machine, following orders and collecting a paycheck. But he also knew that something wasn't right. The whole situation smelled fishy. He decided to try a different approach. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge, flipping it open for the tow truck driver to see. "I'm Chief Thomas," he said, his voice now carrying the weight of his authority. "Chief of police for this county. And I'm investigating a possible case of fraud and abuse of power. I'm going to need your cooperation." The tow truck driver's eyes widened slightly. He quickly stubbed out his cigarette with his boot. "Chief. I didn't know. That's the problem, isn't it?" Chief Thomas said, his gaze unwavering. "People often don't know who they're dealing with until it's too late. Now, tell me everything you know about Patricia Miller and her relationship with Ace Towing." The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. Karen was about to face a whole new level of scrutiny. The tow truck driver, now clearly flustered, stammered, "Chief, with all due respect, I just work here. I don't know anything about fraud or anything like that. I just get the calls from the office." "Then let's go talk to the office," Chief Thomas said, gesturing towards the small, run-down building that served as Ace Towing's headquarters. The tow truck driver nervously led Chief Thomas inside. The office was small and cluttered, with stacks of paperwork piled high on every surface. A woman with bright red hair and too much makeup sat behind the counter, talking on the phone. She looked up as they entered, her expression sour. Yeah, I know you're waiting," she snapped into the phone. "Just hold on a minute." She slammed the phone down and glared at Chief Thomas and the tow truck driver. "What do you want?" "I'm Chief Thomas, and I need to speak with the owner or manager about a towing authorization," Chief Thomas said, flashing his badge again. The woman's eyes widened, and her jaw dropped. "Chief. I didn't realize." "That seems to be a common problem today," Chief Thomas said dryly. "Now, where's the person in charge?" The woman quickly ushered them into a small back office. A man in a cheap suit sat behind a large desk, his face pale. He looked up, startled. "What's going on, Brenda?" he asked nervously. Brenda whispered something in his ear, and the man's eyes widened in alarm. He stood up quickly, extending his hand to Chief Thomas. "Chief Thomas. What a surprise. What can I do for you?" he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I'm investigating a possible case of fraud and abuse of power involving your company and the Meadow Creek HOA, Chief Thomas said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And I have a lot of questions. Starting with, what kind of arrangement do you have with Patricia Miller?" The atmosphere in the room had shifted completely. The rude service and exorbitant fees were suddenly a distant memory. The staff of Ace Towing were now eager to cooperate with the chief of police. Karen's little scheme was about to unravel. The owner of Ace Towing, a sweaty man named Mr. Henderson, was now practically tripping over himself to answer Chief Thomas's questions. He revealed that Patricia Miller had a special arrangement with the company, receiving a percentage of the towing fees for every car towed from Meadow Creek. It was a clear conflict of interest, and Chief Thomas knew he had enough evidence to launch a full-scale investigation. But first, he wanted to confront Karen. He left Ace Towing, got into his car, and drove straight to Patricia Miller's house. He knew exactly where she lived. She was listed as the HOA president on all the official documents. He parked his car in front of her perfectly manicured lawn and walked up to her front door. He rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Patricia Miller opened the door, a look of surprise on her face. "Chief Thomas." "What a surprise," she said, her voice dripping with suspicion. "What can I do for you?" "I think you know why I'm here, Ms. Miller," Chief Thomas said, his voice firm. "I'd like to discuss the towing of my vehicle this morning." Patricia Miller's eyes narrowed. "You violated the HOA rules, Mr. Thomas. The towing was perfectly justified. $79 for slightly long grass, Ms. Miller. And a plastic flamingo? Do you really think that justifies towing my car and charging me $200 in fees?" "The rules are the rules, Mr. Thomas," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "No one is above the law in Meadow Creek." "Is that so, Ms. Miller?" Chief Thomas said, a hint of steel in his voice. "Because I'm starting to think that you're operating outside the law. I just came from Ace Towing, and I learned all about your special arrangement with them. Receiving kickbacks for every car you have towed. That sounds a lot like fraud to me." Patricia Miller's face turned white. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Chief Thomas knew he had her cornered. Now it was time to see how far she was willing to go to defend her little kingdom. Patricia Miller, despite the shock on her face, quickly regained her composure. She might have been caught off guard, but she wasn't about to back down. She puffed out her chest and adopted a condescending tone. Fraud? Really, Mr. Thomas, that's a rather strong word, don't you think, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I assure you, everything we do at the HOA is perfectly legal and above board. A special arrangement where you receive a percentage of every towing fee? That doesn't sound legal to me, Ms. Miller, Chief Thomas countered, his voice unwavering. It's a consulting fee, Mr. Thomas, she retorted, waving her hand dismissively. I provide valuable services to Ace Towing, ensuring that they are aware of any vehicles in violation of our HOA rules. So, you're admitting that you profit from the towing of your neighbors' cars? Chief Thomas asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm ensuring that our community maintains its high standards, Mr. Thomas, she said, her voice rising in pitch. Someone has to do it. And if I receive a small compensation for my efforts, what's the harm? The harm, Ms. Miller, is that you're abusing your power and exploiting your neighbors for personal gain, Chief Thomas said, his voice hardening. And you're doing it all while hiding behind the guise of community service. I don't have to listen to this, Patricia Miller said, turning to slam the door in his face. I'm the president of the HOA, and I have the right to enforce the rules as I see fit. Chief Thomas blocked the door with his foot. You also have a responsibility to uphold the law, Ms. Miller, he said, his voice low and dangerous. And right now, I'm not convinced that you're doing that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his badge, flashing it in front of her face. I'm Chief Thomas, Chief of Police. And I'm here to tell you that your little game is over. Patricia Miller's eyes widened in disbelief. She finally realized who she was dealing with. The condescending tone vanished, replaced by a look of pure panic. Chief. I didn't know. That's right, Ms. Miller, Chief Thomas said, his voice dripping with irony. You didn't know. And that's why you're in so much trouble. The tables had turned completely. Karen was finally facing the consequences of her actions. Ms. Miller, Chief Thomas began, his voice now calm and measured, despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. Let's be reasonable here. We're talking about a $79 fine. For slightly long grass and a plastic flamingo. Do you honestly believe that towing a person's car is a proportionate response to such a minor infraction? He paused, giving her a chance to respond, but she remained silent, her eyes wide with fear. Think about it, Ms. Miller, he continued. You inconvenienced me, you cost me $200 in towing fees, and you wasted my time. All over something that could have been resolved with a simple phone call or a friendly reminder. Is that really the kind of community you want to create in Meadow Creek? One where neighbors are constantly at each other's throats over petty rules and regulations. He took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. You're so focused on enforcing these ridiculous rules that you've lost sight of what's really important, being a good neighbor, fostering a sense of community, and treating people with respect. Instead, you've created an atmosphere of fear and resentment. People are afraid to step out of line, afraid to express themselves, afraid to be themselves. He paused again, letting his words sink in. And for what, Ms. Miller? To maintain some artificial standard of perfection? To satisfy your own need for control? Is it really worth sacrificing the happiness and well-being of your neighbors for the sake of slightly shorter grass and a perfectly placed trash can? He sighed, shaking his head. I'm not saying that rules are unimportant. They're necessary to maintain order and prevent chaos. But rules should be reasonable, and they should be enforced fairly. And they should never be used as a weapon to punish and control people. He looked directly at Patricia Miller, his eyes filled with disappointment. You've let this power go to your head, Ms. Miller. And it's time for you to take a step back and reevaluate your priorities. Because right now, you're doing more harm than good. He left the door open and walked away, leaving Karen to contemplate the consequences of her actions. The ball was now in her court. Left alone in her perfectly organized living room, Patricia Miller paced back and forth, her mind racing. The chief of police. Investigating her. It was all too much to comprehend. She had simply been trying to maintain order and uphold the standards of Meadow Creek. How had it all gone so wrong? She tried to convince herself that Chief Thomas was bluffing. He couldn't possibly have any real evidence of wrongdoing. It was just a scare tactic, a way to intimidate her. But deep down, she knew he wasn't bluffing. She had seen the look in his eyes, the unwavering determination. He meant business. She decided to call her lawyer. After a brief conversation, she felt a little bit better, but the lawyer's advice was clear: cooperate with the investigation and try to minimize the damage. But minimizing the damage meant admitting that she had made mistakes, admitting that she had abused her power. And that was something Patricia Miller was loath to do. She had dedicated years of her life to the HOA, sacrificing her time and energy to make Meadow Creek the best it could be. She wasn't going to let some disgruntled police chief tear it all down. She decided to take a different approach. She would justify her actions, explain her reasoning, and convince Chief Thomas that she had only been acting in the best interests of the community. She would show him the violation notices, the complaints from other residents, the evidence that proved she was doing what was necessary to maintain order. She marched out of her house, determined to confront Chief Thomas again and set the record straight. She spotted him getting into his car across the street. "Chief Thomas," she yelled, hurrying towards him. "Wait, I need to explain." Chief Thomas stopped and turned to face her, a weary expression on his face. "Explain what, Ms. Miller? Explain how you profited from the misfortunes of your neighbors. Explain how you used your power to bully and intimidate people." "No, that's not." "Ms. Miller," Chief Thomas interrupted, holding up his hand. "With all due respect, I'm not interested in your justifications. I've heard enough. I'm going to conduct a thorough investigation into the HOA's practices, and I suggest you cooperate fully." He got into his car and drove away, leaving Patricia Miller standing on the sidewalk, fuming. Back at the police station, Chief Thomas assigned 2 detectives to investigate the Meadow Creek HOA. He instructed them to review all the HOA's financial records, interview residents, and examine the contracts with Ace Towing and other vendors. He wanted to know everything about how the HOA was run and where the money was going. The detectives quickly uncovered a number of irregularities. The HOA's financial records were a mess, with missing receipts, unexplained expenses, and questionable payments to various contractors. Several residents complained about being unfairly targeted by the HOA, receiving excessive fines for minor infractions. And the contract with Ace Towing was unusually lucrative, with the HOA receiving a much higher percentage of the towing fees than was typical. The investigation also revealed that Patricia Miller had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, including lavish vacations and expensive home improvements. She had been siphoning off money for years, using her position as president to enrich herself at the expense of her neighbors. Chief Thomas was disgusted. He had suspected that something wasn't right, but he had never imagined the extent of the corruption. Patricia Miller wasn't just a zealous HOA president, she was a common thief, exploiting her neighbors for personal gain. He knew he had to take action. He couldn't let her get away with this. He authorized the detectives to obtain a search warrant for Patricia Miller's home and office. It was time to bring her to justice. The days of Karen ruling Meadow Creek with an iron fist were coming to an end. The wheels of justice were turning. The sight of police cars parked outside Patricia Miller's house sent shockwaves through Meadow Creek. The news spread like wildfire. Chief Thomas was investigating the HOA. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion. Some residents, those who had been unfairly targeted by the HOA, were overjoyed. They saw Chief Thomas as a hero, a champion of the underdog, finally standing up to Karen and her tyrannical rule. They openly voiced their support, sharing stories of their own experiences with the HOA and praising Chief Thomas for his courage. Others, however, remained loyal to Patricia Miller. They believed that she was simply doing what was necessary to maintain order and protect property values. They argued that the rules were in place for a reason and that everyone should abide by them. They saw Chief Thomas as an outsider, interfering in the affairs of their community and undermining the authority of the HOA. The neighborhood became divided. Neighbors who had once been friendly now avoided each other, afraid to voice their opinions. Arguments erupted at community gatherings, and the atmosphere became increasingly tense. Even within families, there were disagreements. Some spouses supported Chief Thomas, while others sided with Patricia Miller. Dinner table conversations became battlegrounds, as family members debated the merits of HOA rules and the fairness of the investigation. The local newspaper picked up the story, and Meadow Creek became the center of a media frenzy. News crews descended on the town, interviewing residents and filming the perfectly manicured lawns. The story of the HOA Karen and the police chief became a national sensation. As the investigation continued, more and more residents began to question the HOA's practices. They started to realize that Patricia Miller's actions had gone too far and that it was time for a change. The tide was turning against Karen, but she wasn't about to give up without a fight. She had too much to lose. The battle for the heart and soul of Meadow Creek was far from over. The community was split, and the stakes were high. Recognizing the deep divisions within Meadow Creek and the need for lasting change, Chief Thomas decided to take a proactive approach. He knew that simply removing Patricia Miller from power wouldn't solve the underlying problems. The HOA's rules were too strict, the enforcement was too aggressive, and the entire system was ripe for abuse. He decided to propose a series of reforms to the HOA, aiming to make the rules more reasonable and the enforcement less aggressive. He drafted a detailed proposal, outlining specific changes to the HOA bylaws. His proposed reforms included eliminating the most ridiculous rules. He proposed eliminating rules about gnome height, holiday decoration duration, and the precise length of grass. Implementing a warning system. He proposed that residents receive a written warning before being fined for a first-time violation. Establishing a dispute resolution process. He proposed creating a system for resolving disputes between residents and the HOA in a fair and impartial manner. Increasing transparency. He proposed making the HOA's financial records available for public inspection. Limiting the HOA's power to tow vehicles. He proposed that towing be reserved only for serious violations that posed an immediate threat to public safety. He presented his proposal to the HOA board, knowing that Patricia Miller would vehemently oppose it. He also shared his proposal with the local newspaper, hoping to gain public support for his reforms. The reaction was immediate and predictably divided. Those who had been unfairly targeted by the HOA praised his proposal as a breath of fresh air. They saw it as a chance to finally live in peace and, as expected, Patricia Miller vehemently opposed Chief Thomas's proposed reforms. She saw them as a direct threat to her authority and a dismantling of everything she had worked so hard to achieve. She launched a counteroffensive, rallying her supporters and spreading misinformation about Chief Thomas's proposal. She claimed that his reforms would lead to chaos, anarchy, and a decline in property values. She accused him of being a meddling outsider who didn't understand the needs of the community. The HOA board became a battleground, with Chief Thomas's supporters and Patricia Miller's loyalists clashing over every issue. Meetings became heated and acrimonious, with personal attacks and accusations flying back and forth. Patricia Miller used her position as president to block Chief Thomas's reforms at every turn. She refused to schedule a vote on his proposal, and she stacked the committees with her supporters to ensure that they would reject any changes to the bylaws. But Chief Thomas wasn't giving up. He knew that he had the support of a majority of the residents, and he was determined to give them a voice. He organized a series of town hall meetings to discuss his proposal and gather public feedback. He encouraged residents to attend the HOA board meetings and voice their opinions. The power struggle within the HOA intensified. Patricia Miller's grip on power was slipping, but she was determined to hold on at all costs. She resorted to increasingly desperate tactics, including spreading rumors about Chief Thomas's personal life and threatening to fine residents who supported his reforms. The situation in Meadow Creek had reached a boiling point. The community was divided, the HOA was in disarray, and the future of the town hung in the balance. It was clear that a showdown was coming. The residents would have to choose between Chief Thomas's vision of a more reasonable and. To resolve the escalating conflict, a town hall meeting was scheduled to discuss the HOA's future. The meeting was held at the Meadow Creek Community Center, and it was packed to capacity. News cameras lined the back of the room, and residents spilled out into the hallway. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Chief Thomas and Patricia Miller were both given the opportunity to present their cases. Patricia Miller spoke first, defending her actions and. Patricia Miller, with a trembling voice, defended her record as HOA president. Defending the importance of maintaining community standards and protecting property values. She acknowledged that some of the rules may have been a bit strict, but she insisted that they were all in the best interests of Meadow Creek. She pleaded with the residents to trust her judgment and reject Chief Thomas's radical reforms. Then, it was Chief Thomas's turn to speak. He spoke passionately about the importance of community, respect, and common sense. He argued that the HOA should serve the residents, not the other way around. He outlined his proposed reforms, explaining how they would make the HOA more fair, transparent, and accountable. He concluded his remarks by saying, "This isn't about me versus Ms. Miller. It's about the future of Meadow Creek. It's about creating a community where everyone feels welcome, valued, and respected. It's about building a better future for our children and grandchildren." After both sides had presented their cases, the residents voted on the proposed reforms. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor of Chief Thomas's proposal. The reforms were adopted, and Patricia Miller was ousted from her position as HOA president. In the aftermath, Meadow Creek began to heal. The HOA was reorganized, and the new board members were committed to implementing Chief Thomas's reforms. The ridiculous rules were eliminated, the enforcement became less aggressive, and the atmosphere in the community became much more positive and welcoming. Patricia Miller, humbled by her experience, retreated from public life. She apologized to the residents for her actions and pledged to make amends. She even started volunteering at a local charity. As for Chief Thomas, he became a local hero. He was praised for his courage, his leadership, and his commitment to the community. He often joked about the $79 fine and the plastic flamingo, and it became a running gag among his officers and the residents of Meadow Creek. The story of the HOA Karen and the police chief became a legend in Meadow Creek, a reminder of the importance of community, common sense, and standing up for what's right. And Chief Thomas, the dedicated police chief who just wanted to live in peace, learned a valuable lesson about the power of community and the importance of fighting for what you believe in, even if it starts with a $79 fine. The plastic flamingo, by the way, became a symbol of the new, more relaxed Meadow Creek, proudly displayed on many lawns throughout the neighborhood.